Hello everyone, welcome to another Thursday. That means it's time for a gear talk. I say that all the time. There's nothing really new except for what's behind the camera right now. And if you haven't heard, I have a new setup and everything, so I'm kind of trying to figure out how I'm going to do everything here from now on, because I do have a webcam now. I do have a lot of things, and I can kind of do different positions and stuff. I'm going to test that out throughout the coming talks we have, but for now I'm just going to keep it simple like I normally do, and then kind of just evolve from there. So don't expect this to be permanent. I'm going to try tinkering and trying out new things as I go. So anyway, welcome everybody. It's time for a gear talk. We're starting off talking this year about Gabe's Convoy, as I said, in the final gear talk for 2022. We're starting off Gabe's Convoy and making our way all the way through it. I put up a poll to see who the first character or characters we're going to talk about are, and the answer I got today was going to be the Disciples and the Zealots that Ukkon introduces in Gears Tactics. Now, I put these two as a character discussion, kind of like how I did for Tyrone and Marcy, just because, like, they're not really the dual, like, the opposites, because this is just a new form of troops that we're introduced to. But I see it as kind of like, if I'm going to talk about Marcy and Tyrone, I might as well put the Disciple and the Zealot in the same video. Disciples and Zealots. There's more than one, trust me. But I thought we would talk about them, go over what they are, some theories going around them, because as you'll see, kind of, they have lambent placed inside of their body that runs through their bloodstream that Ukkon introduced. And even the wikis are kind of like, this is a little counterproductive here, but I have a few ideas on how this can play out and why this kind of works. So let's see what we've got going on here. Starting off, let's talk about what each one of these troops can do and what they are, kind of. So we'll start off talking about the Disciples. So the Disciples are a troop made that are pretty much the grunts or the shock troopers of the group. Not even the grunts, because this is like the one step above them. But you take the normal drone and you kind of just soup them up with Imulsion. This is what Ukkon was kind of testing out and working on, and we learned that yes, the Imulsion that is introduced into the Locusts, if it's a certain amount, it ain't going to turn them lambent, but it'll also give them effects and make them stronger. Kind of like, and we'll talk about this a little further in, kind of like what Rustlung does. It gives you like the rage aspect. We're going to talk about how that kind of can go into it. But yes, the Disciples are the drones that are souped up with this, and they go through, and they're pretty much juiced up and ready to go. Their health increases, their damage increases, their ferocity increases. All of that kind of just peaks out. Now, going from there, you also have the Zealots. The Zealots are what happens if you introduce all this to a Kantus. They get a boost in health, a boost in damage, a boost in aggression, and they're Kantus, so they're healing people, screaming, hollering, giving buffs. That's pretty much what they're going to be doing. So it's really odd, because the Kantus one is kind of like the big no joke, do not mess with this, while the Disciples will just run at you and smack you in the face. So how it runs down also is there is a side effect, obviously, with Imulsion being introduced into the body. It makes you more feral, you could say, just like what Rustlung will do to you. Again, we'll get to that in a moment, because there is a comparison to make, but it kind of makes you a bit more feral. And not only that, once you die, you pass, the vapors that are stored up in your body, since they're not being used to pump through, kind of just outwardly go out, and you now have airborne Imulsion that'll probably cause Rustlung in human beings if it were to be breathed in. I want to assume, since the Locusts are so like played around with when it came to lambency, when it first started out making Locusts in general over with like Niall Samson, I'm assuming they can't get Rustlung. That's just an assumption I've made. It's never been shown they can get it. You've got, well, no, there is one example that comes up, and that is Ukkon. But Ukkon was originally a human before he became a part of the Locusts. So he's kind of an exception to this. So I would like to say, like, drones and all that probably don't get infected the same way as, like, Ukkon first got it, or humans would. So the reason I bring all this up, going into the Rustlung aspect of it, is that Ukkon has Rustlung. Not only him, but other humans have Rustlung also. Gabe later on gets it, but this isn't the best example. The best example to bring up for this would be when it comes to, like, Barrick. He also has it, and one of the side effects is the boosted enhanced rage. Now, the reason I think that Ukkon was playing around with lambency and kind of placing it inside of his troops, again, he didn't have a lot of them he worked on. Like, he had a certain amount, and Gabe and all of them going through after Ukkon was dealt with, they were kind of mopping up the remainder of his army. It's not like the disciples and zealots were also helping out Rom and all of them. That never happened as far as we can tell, that we currently have, that we can look at for like the source material. As far as we can tell, they were specifically with Ukkon himself. Now, the reason I'm bringing everything up is that Barrick and Harper's his name. Oh, I feel good remembering that one. Harper, they had rust lung, and they had a strain of it, not even a strain, but a dosage of it where it affects their rage. So, for instance, Barrick became so strong, he was able to fisticuffs the Locusts, which knives are even a problem now and then, and he's able to rip them in half, holding both their severed body parts separately like this. That is the rage he got. Now, since Ukkon has rust lung, he would also have some of the symptoms, I'm assuming. So he probably understood, okay, there's a level of rage and adrenaline that goes boosting through when this is introduced. If I can somehow kind of control it or make it possible to like push it through where that's what's being enabled, that could probably work for my people. Now, obviously we're dealing with Imulsion here, and we know what happens with Imulsion. I have a very strong feeling Ukkon did not sit there and think like, put him in all my Locusts, let's see what happens. No, it is stated that he does have the ability to turn humans into Locusts. He's able to do that, and he did do a lot of his testing through that method and testing it on the Locusts that were, the humans that were turned Locusts. He did do some testing. He probably started practicing it on that. We do see in the comics, in Rise of Rom, he is testing things. We see that, I believe it is a Locust he has in the tank, so I want to believe he was already testing this when Rom was already planning on usurping Srok and taking over. So my assumption is he was already doing his testing, his planning. He probably already had a few test subjects going at that point. And one thing that really comes up is, how is Mira okay with this? So, how would Mira, knowing what Imulsion can do, fighting a war for her people to keep them alive against the Lambent, why would she be okay with pretty much introducing lambency into her people? So, there's a lot of angles you can spin it. Mira is absolutely 100% for her people. Now, she's for her people, but we have seen kind of on an individual level, she's not that much for. For instance, if some locusts have to die, she's okay with letting that happen. She still cares for her people, but she understands, like, hey, if like 10 of my people have to die to save all of us, that's what's going to have to happen. That's like Mira's mindset for everything. So that's the hard part, because she is very much not okay with lambency. We see that with when she talks to Adam. She's trying to get Adam to find a cure. Like, she is not okay with that. So why would she be okay with Ukkon doing things? Well, here's the thing. Ukkon is one of the oldest Locusts there have been. He was the original sire. So here's the thing. When they left, it was Mira, Srok, and it was Ukkon. They were the three originals that actually left and went and started the Hollow, started Nexus. They were the originals. So I want to assume that she probably knew him very well. You know, they were the three that made it there and kind of led everything. So she was probably sitting there like, hey, you know, I'm not okay with this, but Ukkon, he would never betray me. Me and Ukkon, at least in her mind, she would never say it out loud because of how proper she presents herself. But me and Ukkon are friends. He wouldn't try and abandon, like, all of his people to go on some crazy thing like Niles did. He wouldn't do that. So even though I am not for this, I trust in what Ukkon is going to do. I trust that his examination, his tests, all of this will at least have some fruition, and maybe we can at least use this to at least fight against what is attacking our people. Essentially talking about the Lambent. Now, he was only testing all of this. That creature we saw in there that is possibly a Locust was probably his first, or maybe one of his first attempts at creating a disciple. So I'm going to assume disciples came first, and then Zealots were probably like, okay, I kind of got this perfected. Let's see what happens when we introduce it into, I was about to say Theron for a moment, into a Kantus and see what happens. Who knows? Like, this was 1 year after, like, E-Day. So, like, within, like, the 1 year from E-Day when we first get introduced to Ukkon in the comics, that's, like, maybe, like, what? Like, a year and a couple months, maybe like a year and, like, half a year, something like that. So he very obviously kind of perfected one and got the other one close to perfection. What would he have done if he introduced, like, a Berserker? Or if he got a hold of the Therons? What would he have done with Therons, honestly? Like, he probably would have continued to branch out. Now, we did see he had his own pocket of his army. So that was his troops. Maybe Mira said, like, hey, look, we're not ready to be testing this stuff on our people. We still have to take the surface. I don't want you expanding your research. Do what you want with the people that I've given you, but do not continue this. Like, you have a certain amount of people I've given you, like maybe like 100, maybe like let's say 400 locusts. Obviously, I think there were more, but let's say 400. I have a feeling she would have been like, use the 400 how you see fit. Do what you want with them. If you want to experiment, go ahead and experiment. Don't go after Karn's... Well, Karn was dead by now, so Karn doesn't count. Don't go after Rom's units. Don't go after my inner palace guards. Don't go after the foot soldiers we're leading. None of that. Just focus on your people, and if we have some success, we'll look into it. But we have to deal with the surface, then we got to deal with down below. So that's where we're going with this for now. And I have a feeling Ukkon would have been like, fine, as long as I get to test things and I have a bunch of humans to play with. Why not? So that's probably like explaining like why like we didn't see more of them, why they were first introduced in tactics and nowhere else. Again, there were a few amount of them. Like, there were not a lot of these two groups. Kind of like the Ragers. There were not a lot of Ragers, and the Ragers pretty much went extinct as far as we knew up until Halvo Bay when we returned. They were pretty much extinct. I'm going to assume Disciples and Zealots, like, Ukkon was no longer there. He didn't have the, like, when he died, there were no other Locusts that we are aware of that could have picked up the mantle to be the scientist of the Locusts. Probably none of them could do it. That's why probably all the Hydras he created, there's not many. So there's probably, like, that one left that Scourge was riding was probably like, hey, this is, like, the last one we have. Don't screw this up. Take it out in emergencies. Kind of like that. I'm guessing Disciples and Zealots, no one could make them anymore. No one wanted to deal with the Imulsion. So they were probably like, well, if they die, they die. We can't really make more if we wanted. So, Ukkon's gone. What are we going to do? So, because, what, you think Rom was going to pick up and play scientist? No, he's leading an entire army. He's the general of everything. He's not going to do it. Scourge is busy with the religious sector of everything. He's not going to do anything. So, yeah, once these two went extinct and died, I guess at that point they'd be a kind of species or a variant of Drones and Kantus. Once their variants are gone, no one's going to make more. It's not like an average drone or Kantus is going to know how to do it. Ukkon spent years working on this. So, yeah. Where they are in the series right now, they're gone. They're extinct. I don't think there's a single way you could even bring them back in the current stuff. Like, how would you bring a Disciple or a Zealot back, like, all the way into the current events with, like, Kate and Marcus, JD, Dell, well, whichever one of them are around? How are you going to do it? Like, what? Like, oh, I'm the last living Zealot that I was alive until Adam's machine went off, and then I was cocooned, and now I've got this big, thick crystal body because it was inside of me, like, more than the others, so I'm a crystal man now. Like, what are you going to do? Like, there's no way. There weren't that many either. Like, out of his entire army, like, we get that one scene where he has a lot of them coming out. But I'm assuming that was all of them. I don't think he had stragglers anywhere. We fight them later on, but what? You're like, fine, maybe a dozen of them weren't there. I'm sorry, but that's about it. So I think that's going to do it about the Zealots and the Disciples. There's not a lot to talk about except for that. They were very dangerous. Like, if he would have actually perfected and lived on to like 14 AE, I don't even want to imagine what he would have done. He would have had, pretty much all of Kadar would have been his playground. He would have had an entire country would have just been under Ukkon for him to just play around with. And imagine that, like, all of his Locusts being like that. No way. No, he would have been such a bigger threat. Like, if you had to measure out how deadly they were compared to other units, honestly, I think get a Disciple, like, ticked enough to, like, to the level where he's tapping into his full-on, like, quote-unquote, rust-long rage. I think, honestly, a fist fight, he'd beat a Boomer. I honestly think so. Like, imagine that full rage just swinging. He's got it pumping through his body. Definitely. I think they could have done it. So, that's going to do it. Not a lot. This is a shorter one. Yeah. So, next video is just going to be about something involving, like, locations or items or, like, theories or something like that. Every other video, I'm going to sprinkle in a character one just like we did for Highbusters. So, don't expect to see a poll for the next one. I'm probably just going to pick it myself, and then we'll go on to some more characters. So, I want to thank everyone for watching. I want to thank everyone for making this possible. And thank the patrons for making this possible. I will see you guys in the next video and the next Gear Talk. Y'all have a good one. Later!